I'm going to start with a quote because it's in honor of all the poets who had to put up with a hell of a lot more than I ever put up with. It's from Toni Morrison.
Yes.
I knew I was female before I knew I was black. And I think of Lenore when I think of it. People were asking me tonight how well I knew Lenore, and I was reminded of what Marilyn Monroe said when she was asked if she knew Dr. Albert Schweitzer. We've never dated. The 50s were, the poets we're talking about, that was their 20s. They sort of lived in a very quiet, so did I, a very quiet vacuum society. It was once described as the bland leading the bland. And a lot of us were good citizens. For instance, do you realize how many beat poets went to Ivy League colleges? Let me tell you something about Ivy League colleges in the 50s. I went to CCNY. If you went to an Ivy League college in the 50s, you were a very good boy in high school. Or you didn't get to go. And fame, such as it is, came to all of these poets not in the traditional way of suddenly waking up famous. No, no, no. Years and years of total obscurity. When their book, not your first book, but the first book that sold, Alan was 36, Lenore was 34, Ferlinghetti was 39. It was the work was from their young years, like with Frost, but that kind of world wasn't waiting for them. The 60s sort of woke up and said, hey, maybe these people have something. Oh, I wanted to tell you, this wasn't planned. I want to tell you a story about Kerouac, because I saw Bob Stock's picture on the wall, and of course there's a lot of Kerouac here. And I'm supposed to be explaining the 50s and 60s, and this will explain, if you're really listening. I was at a party at Bob Stock's house, and there were maybe 60 people. It was a mellow party, except Mrs. Stock kept pacing. And finally, Jack went over to her and said, what's wrong? And she said, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and my 15-year-old daughter isn't here. And Bob Stock quickly jumped in and said, Jack doesn't want to hear about that crap. And Kerouac shouted, if I had a 15-year-old daughter and she weren't home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and he realized everybody was watching him. Quiet. And he said, oh, don't take me wrong. I take drugs. That was then, okay? At that time,
and Zappa would have said, I'd cover that jar with chocolate syrup.
Oh, no, butterscotch. Okay, trying to explain the 50s and 60s. I was working in New York at Doubleday, and we were getting manuscripts from poets. And if you've never heard the phrase, be patient with me, virgins and whores. What does that mean? First of all the copy editors were like me, hot-blooded young guys in their early 20s who wanted to read about sex, but who were kind of fascinated by the lack of sex, which it probably was happening in their lives. It wasn't mine. But, excuse me. It was amazing. All the manuscripts that were passed up, and some got published, were by women who wrote at length about unseemly sex, very badly, and an incredible number of books by nuns. Many of which got published. If you go to the library, you're going to still see a woman's name with initials after it, you know, like S.J. or something. Yeah. In fact, there were so many of them. I brought you one poem. I wrote this on the manuscript of one of the nuns that we didn't publish. Sister Veronica avoided sex. Its joys, its hopes, its terrors. Upon her book I wrote this text. No hits, no runs, no errors. Oh, speaking of reading glasses, I bought these today. You're really the first people ever to see them. Okay. Philip Larkin has a wonderful essay in which he says that sexual intercourse was introduced to Western civilization in the 1960s. Well, probably true, looking back, probably true. I think what happens, by the way, over the last 3,000 years all over the world, just to take a broad view, is that behavior never changes. It's what you're willing to talk about that changes from generation to generation. At least that's what I've found out. What Lenore did, and we all knew it at the time, because she was the talk of us, not just the people who bought her book because they heard it was dirty, but the people who cared about poetry. She invited sex into writing. That's what she did. And were we ever proud of her. Oh, by the way, I want to thank the policeman who arrested Shig and who arrested booksellers and all that. And if you weren't there, it was St. Mary's arresting San Francisco State. That's what happened, okay? Lenore was direct, and she called things by their names. By the way, that's the only thing Kung Fu Tzu ever said to his grown son in the monastery, called things by their names. But it wasn't her talent. It was what made her famous and made her other poems available, okay? Later she wrote this. The night stands waiting by my window, till lights grow on the hills like signal fires, and the fog curls their lovely arms around night, and the city kissing all the secret places over and over again. And still later, of a lover, his heart was as tender as a cactus without any spines, a rose with soft thorns. Poets give each other courage. Men poets think of Auden, they think of William Carlos Williams, they think of Yeats. We should not fail to notice the courage that she gave poets who could be here. People like Rich and Sexton could tell us the courage that that young lady gave to them. Thank you.